A former Missouri City police officer who was convicted of having his wife killed nearly 30 years ago now has an execution date. Robert Fratta is set to be put to death on January 10th, 2023. Fratta hired a hitman to kill his estranged wife, Farah, back in 1994.
Huntsville, Texas, the 10th of January, 2023. A man walks into a death chamber. He is 65 years old. His name is Robert Fratta. In a few minutes, he will die by lethal injection. The warden asks him if he has any final words. He says one word: no. That's it. No apology. No explanation. Nothing. But this story does not start in that room. It starts almost 30 years earlier, in a quiet garage in Texas, where his wife, Farah, was shot twice and left to die. Here's the strange part. While Farah was being killed, Robert was sitting in church with their 3 children. He had never taken them there before that night, and after that night, he never took them again. There's one more detail that will stay with you. That same evening, Robert kept walking away to use a payphone, again and again. What he was really doing on that phone would take investigators years to fully understand. Before we get into how this case cracked open, hit subscribe. This channel covers true crime cases built on court records and verified facts, not guesses. Stay until the end, because what happened after that phone call is impossible to believe. Farah was born on the 5th of August, 1961, in Guildford, England. She grew up in Sutton, in South London. She went to Newman High School and finished in 1978. The people who knew her say the same thing about her, over and over. She was warm. She was social. She was easy to like. Her co-worker and close friend, Kitty Waters Sneed, later called her free-spirited and said she was exceptionally well-liked by everyone around her. After school, Farah started working in airline ticketing in London. That job would change her whole life. She applied to airlines in Houston, Texas, and got hired by American Airlines as a ticketing officer. It was at that job where she met a fellow ticket agent named Robert Fratta. According to Kitty, the two of them just hit it off. On the 7th of May, 1983, Farah became Farah Fratta. Over the next 9 years, they had 3 children together: Bradley, Daniel, Amber. But from the outside, a marriage can look fine when it isn't. Behind closed doors, things were falling apart. In March of 1992, Farah filed for divorce. Her lawyer, Christine Jantz, began the case. It would drag on for 2.5 years. A custody trial was finally set. The date was the 28th of November, 1994. Farah never made it to that courtroom. Robert Allen Fratta was born on the 22nd of February, 1957. By his mid-30s, he had a job that gave him real power in his town. He worked as a public safety officer in Missouri City, Texas. He was trained as both a police officer and a firefighter. To his neighbors, he looked like a normal family man. He went to the gym. He knew people around town. He wore a uniform to work every day. On the outside, he looked like a devoted father. But court records tell a different story. Before Farah ever filed for divorce, Robert had already received a formal suspension from his job for sexual harassment. That happened before any of this began. And then there were the things he was saying out loud, to people who knew him. According to court records, Robert asked more than a dozen people if they knew someone who could kill his wife. He said this at his gym. He said it at work. He said it at a diner. He said it at a nightclub. An acquaintance named Mike Edens later said Robert looked straight at him and told him, "I'm going to find a way to knock her off." To a close friend, Robert said something even colder. He said, "I'll just kill her, and I'll do my time, and when I get out, I'll have my kids." He wasn't hiding it. He was saying it to anyone who would listen. Months before Farah was killed, something terrifying happened inside her own home. She woke up to find a masked man standing over her. He was holding a stun gun. She called 911 right away. Detective Larry Davis of the Harris County Sheriff's Office responded to that call. He believed Farah. And he did something most detectives wouldn't do. He went straight to Robert and confronted him face to face. He told him, "I know what you're up to, and it's not going to work." Robert ignored him completely. Around this same time, Robert kept going to the President and First Lady Health Club in Humble, Texas. That gym became something else for him. It became the place where he searched for someone willing to help him get rid of his wife. And he wasn't quiet about it. He talked about wanting Farah dead at the gym, at work, at a diner, and at a nightclub. Friends warned him that talking this much was putting him in danger. He didn't seem to care. In fact, he told them the opposite. He believed that the more people he told, the harder it would be for police to prove anything if Farah was ever actually killed. For a while he was right. At the gym, Robert finally found someone willing to listen. His name was Joseph Andrew Pristash. He was 38 years old, and he had a criminal record. Pristash didn't walk away from the conversation. He listened, and then he found someone to actually pull the trigger. Living next door to Pristash was an 18-year-old named Howard Paul Guidry. He had already gotten attention from Houston police before, and he agreed to take the job. The payment was set, $1,000 up front, in cash. Robert promised there would be more later. He expected money from Farah's life insurance and from an overseas trust fund set up for the children. That offer eventually climbed to $5,000. Robert didn't even need to buy a weapon. He already owned a .38 caliber Charter Arms revolver, purchased back in 1982. In 1993, Farah had asked her father, Lex Bakir, to hold on to that gun for her. She didn't feel safe with it in the house. Lex kept it safe until the summer of 1994, when Robert asked for it back. There was one more person who knew what was happening before it happened. Her name was Mary Gipp. She was Pristash's girlfriend, and she knew both Robert and Farah from the gym. She overheard the planning. She said nothing. "If you're getting pulled into this case, hit like right now and drop a comment below. Because what happens next, on the night everything changed, is impossible to believe." Wednesday, the 9th of November, 1994. The Fratta family sat down for dinner together at their home in Atascocita, Texas. Robert, Farah, Bradley, who was 7, Daniel, who was 6, Amber, who was 4. After dinner, Robert took the children out. He dropped the 2 younger ones off at the church nursery. Bradley went to a catechism class. Robert stayed for a parents' meeting. But according to court records, Robert wasn't acting like a man at a parents' meeting. A church worker named Deborah Normile later said that between 7:30 and 8 o'clock that night, Robert kept coming into the church office to use the phone. He would return a page, then stand there and wait for it to ring back. This happened again and again. His son Bradley remembered something too. Later, after they left the church and stopped at a restaurant, Robert left the table at least twice to make calls from a payphone outside. For a man supposedly spending a quiet evening with his kids, he was spending a lot of time on the phone. Meanwhile, across town, Farah had plans of her own. She went out to get a haircut. When she finished, she drove home in her red Mustang convertible. She pulled into the garage at 13,718 Napier Lane. She had no idea someone was already waiting for her. Howard Guidry was there, dressed all in black. He had been dropped off by Pristash and was positioned near the backyard, waiting. At 7:38 in the evening, a neighbor named Laura Holscher was sitting by her window, nursing her infant son. She looked outside and saw Farah pull into the garage. Then she heard a sharp sound. She saw Farah fall. Then she heard a second shot. Holshire called 911 immediately. Her call was recorded, and it still exists today, preserved in court records. She told the dispatcher she had just watched the shooting happen. She said she saw a man dressed in black run from the property and get into a silver car. That car had one headlight burned out. Someone else was already behind the wheel. The car drove off into the night. Farah was still in the garage. Deputies arrived and found her alive but unresponsive. She was airlifted to Memorial Hermann Hospital. She was pronounced dead on arrival. She was 33 years old. Less than an hour later, her father would arrive at the scene, and what he said the moment he got there would haunt this case for decades. Less than an hour after the shooting, Robert arrived at the scene. He brought all 3 children with him. Sergeant Harry Facaris was there, and he noticed something strange right away. Robert wasn't asking the questions a husband would normally ask after learning his wife had just been shot. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't demanding answers. When investigators searched his car that night, they found $1,000 in cash sitting in the glove compartment. Robert told them it was money he had saved up for new carpet. Farah's parents, Lex and Betty Baker, were called and rushed to the scene. Lex arrived, and according to accounts of that night, demanded to know, "Where is that son of a bitch?" He said later that he knew right away Robert had something to do with it. Betty made it to the hospital in time. She found her daughter before the medical team took her away. Farah's eyes were still open. Betty reached out and closed them herself. Within days of the funeral, Robert called Farah's life insurance company to file a claim. The representative told him the payout couldn't happen yet. The death had been classified as a homicide, and the policy couldn't be paid out under those conditions. Robert got angry on the phone, then he hung up. The crime scene gave investigators almost nothing to work with. No fingerprints, no recovered weapon. Just an empty garage and a lot of unanswered questions. Robert's alibi was solid. Multiple witnesses at the church confirmed he was there with his children the entire time. On paper, he couldn't have pulled the trigger, but his behavior kept raising suspicion. When Robert walked out of an interview at the Harris County Sheriff's Office, television cameras were waiting outside. Detective Larry Davis was there, and he said Robert didn't look like a grieving husband at all. Davis described him as swaggering toward the cameras and smiling. Sergeant John Denholm, another investigator on the case, told reporters that Robert seemed real amused by this whole thing. A smile isn't evidence. But it was hard to ignore. In December of 1994, a family court judge ruled on custody. Full custodial rights went to Lex and Betty Baker. Robert was only given supervised visitation, once a week, plus a short daily phone call with the children. Soon after, Missouri City terminated Robert from his job completely. Lex and Betty, desperate for answers, offered a $5,000 reward for any information leading to their daughter's killer. No credible tips ever came in. The case had stalled, and for months, it looked like it might stay that way. On the 1st of March 1995, everything changed. Howard Guidry was arrested after trying to rob a bank on the other side of Houston. When officers searched him, they found a .38 caliber Charter Arms revolver in his backpack. That gun was sent for ballistics testing. The results came back clear. It was the same weapon used to kill Farah Fratta. Investigators traced the gun's registration. It led straight back to a purchase made in 1982 by Robert Fratta. Around the same time, a woman named Mary Gipp finally decided to talk. She went to Detective George Ronald Roberts and told him what she knew. She named Howard Guidry first. Then she named Joseph Pristash. Then she named Robert Fratta. Guidry was brought in for questioning and he confessed. He said Pristash had organized the plan, driven him to the house, and picked him up afterward. He said Robert Fratta was the one who ordered it and paid for it. Here's the part that changed everything. Months earlier, on the night of the murder, Mary Gipp had written down the serial number from that revolver. She never fully explained why she did it, but that one number, written down by instinct, would later match the murder weapon exactly. In May of 1995, Joseph Pristash was arrested at his home. In June of 1995, Robert Fratta was arrested too. He didn't resist. He showed no surprise. He was calm, exactly like he had been every single day since Farah died. All 3 men were charged with capital murder. Robert Fratta, Joseph Pristash, Howard Guidry. Robert went to trial first. On the 17th of April 1996, The jury reached a verdict after less than 1 hour of deliberation. Guilty. On the 3rd of May 1996, he was sentenced to death. Fratta was convicted in July of 1996, after just 17 minutes of deliberation. He was also sentenced to death. Guidry was convicted the following year, in 1997. He received the same sentence. 3 men, 3 death sentences. For a case built on solicitation, that outcome was rare. But the story wasn't over. In October of 2007, federal judge Melinda Harmon overturned Robert's conviction. Her ruling found that the trial had relied on confessions from Fratta and Guidry, and neither of them had testified in court. That violated Robert's constitutional right to confront the witnesses against him. But even while throwing out the conviction, her written opinion did not go easy on him. She described him as egotistical, misogynistic, and vile, with a callous desire to kill his wife. The law required a new trial. It began in May of 2009 in front of Judge Belinda Hill. This time the confessions couldn't be used. Prosecutors rebuilt their case around Mary Gipp's testimony and the physical evidence. On the 14th of May 2009, the jury convicted Robert Fratta for a second time. On the 29th of May 2009, he was sentenced to death again. Robert Fratta spent nearly 14 years on death row after his second sentencing. He never stopped saying he was innocent. In a filing to the United States Supreme Court in 2019, he wrote that he was completely innocent of his wife's death. His last legal effort argued that a key witness had been hypnotized by investigators and that this changed her memory of the crime. The courts rejected it. On the 10th of January 2023, a judge briefly blocked the execution over concerns about the drugs being used. That block was overturned within hours. The Supreme Court declined to step in. That evening, his spiritual advisor, Barry Brown, prayed over him for several minutes inside the execution chamber. Behind the glass stood 3 people: his son, Bradley Baker, Farah's brother, Zane Baker, and victim advocate Andy Kahan. Robert never looked at any of them. When the warden asked if he had a final statement, he said one word: no. At 7:49 in the evening, he was pronounced dead. Joseph Fratta never faced execution. He died on death row in 2025, before any execution date was ever set for him. Howard Guidry is still on death row today, with no execution date scheduled. Of the 3 men who planned Farah's death, only one has faced the punishment they were all given. In the end, Robert never touched a cent. The $100,000 life insurance payout went to Lex and Betty Baker, to raise the children he tried to have killed for it. Bradley, Daniel, and Amber grew up in their grandparents' home. Lex Baker died in 2018. He never got to see the execution he had waited more than 20 years for. Victim advocate Andy Kahan said it best after it was over. Robert had one last chance to look at his own son standing behind that glass and say he was sorry. He chose silence instead. Farah Fratta was 33 years old. She was just 19 days away from a finalized divorce. He chose himself. He chose it in 1994, and he chose it again in his final seconds on that table. What part of this story hit you the hardest? Tell me in the comments below. And if you want more true crime cases built on real court records, not guesses, hit subscribe. There are more stories coming.